In this episode, a hunting trip goes horribly wrong from start to finish as a young hunter mistakenly misidentifies a brown bear for a black one, taking a shot that merely maims the animal, causing it to go berserk. Hit that like button and subscribe right now. This is the terrifying bear attack on Stevenson. Welcome to Final Affliction. On 16th of September 2011, 39-year-old Stevenson headed to a Montana forest. He was out on a hunting trip. He had secured his license to hunt black bears in the woodland along the Montana-Idaho border and joined a group of 3 others. They were each permitted to hunt for black bears in both states, either side of the border. Steve was a devoted husband and a father to 2 young daughters, aged 14 and 10. He worked as a miner for a company called Highcroft, mining for silver and gold. In his spare time, he considered himself as an outdoorsman. He loved hiking in the wilderness, amongst nature, amongst friends. He'd also been hunting in this region before on many occasions. Overall, Steve was excited for their hunting trip together. They were ready to hunt some black bears. As the group hiked into the wilderness, their small talk turned to the job at hand, the prospect of shooting one of nature's greats. After about 3 miles into their trip, Steve and 20-year-old Ty Bell paired off to cover more ground. They often hunted alone, coming together at the end of the day, but they knew grizzly bears were in the area. In fact, they had seen signs of grizzly bears, and they knew it was safer to hunt in pairs. They had said if they saw a grizzly, they would leave and come back another time. As they scoured the woodland for signs of black bears, they climbed a ridge to scout even further. High up on the ridge, the men could see across the valley. At first, there was no sign of any bears, but then Ty thought he spotted one. The 2 men stopped in their tracks. A little distance away, Ty had seen a flash of fur. Something large moved amongst the bushes, its head low to the ground, foraging, perhaps for berries, roots, and leaves. Ty raised his rifle to his eye. He aimed it at the bushes and looked along his scope. As the bear stepped out from behind a bush, Ty pulled the trigger. A single shot rang out. The bear lurched and then ran off into the dense woodland. Steve and Ty waited 15 minutes before following the blood trail. They needed to be sure the bear was dead before they went after it. A wounded beast is the most dangerous of them all. Little did the 2 men know they hadn't shot a black bear. Instead, they had shot its much more aggressive cousin, a grizzly, one of only 45 known to inhabit the Cabinet Yaak ecosystem area. The hunting of grizzlies was illegal in the region, as it was in all 48 lower states. Overhunting had largely decimated the grizzly population over the past century, but through protection and the banning of hunting, their numbers have somewhat recovered in recent decades. Hunters hunting in the state of Montana are required to take a bear identification course. In the thick of the woodland, when the animals are obscured from view, it can be difficult to tell them apart. Often a hunter will just see a flash of fur. They will just catch a glimpse of it, and then they have to make a split-second decision there and then whether to take the shot or not. They are all still classified as an endangered species, though, so the mistaken identity of this grizzly could have meant bad news for Ty, who had now, unintentionally, just broken the law. But the bad news was about to get worse. As the blood trail took the 2 hunters into the thickest of the forest, they suddenly heard a noise, the snap of a twig, the grunting and snorting of a large animal. They knew they were close. They realized that they had made their first mistake. They knew that the shot hadn't killed the bear, but they hadn't left enough time for it to die. Peering around a tree, the 2 men saw it. To their disbelief, a 400-pound, 180-kilogram brown bear stood waiting for them. It wasn't a black bear, as they had originally thought. It was a wounded grizzly, the most dangerous of its kind. And now, it was cornered too. Its breathing was labored, its eyes fixed on the 2 men. It lowered its head, its ears pricked back as it ran at them, launching its attack. The 2 men instinctively raised their rifles and began shooting at the bear. but it didn't slow down. It didn't flinch or veer off its path. It kept coming at them. Steven yelled at the bear. He waved his arms above his head, trying to distract it as he saw that it was fixated on Ty. He was trying to get the bear to come for him rather than his young hunting companion. He was trying to protect the 20-year-old. That was the kind of man he was. He wouldn't have thought twice about it. He purely acted on instinct. A genuinely kind-hearted man who would do anything to protect those around him. It worked. The bear covered the ground between them in less than a few seconds and diverted its attention to Steven. Then it was on top of him. Ty lifted his gun and pointed it at the bear. He fired a shot. The bear began to maul Steven. Ty could hear his friend's cries. He could see the man underneath the animal, scrabbling about, trying to push the huge bear off him, but its weight was too much. Its claws slashed Steven's legs and torso. Its canine teeth tore into his face. He kicked with his feet, but it was too much. He couldn't get the bear off him. Ty pulled his trigger again and again, each time reloading, each time trying to keep his cool, trying to load the gun with trembling fingers and his heart thumping loudly in his chest. Several shots rang out, one after the other in quick succession. They hit the bear in its side. Ty could see the impact of each shot as they pummeled the bear's fur, embedding deep within its body. But the bear was relentless in its attack. It didn't slow down, and it didn't give up. The bullets only enraged it further, the adrenaline surging through its enormous body, masking any pain that must have been building. Then he fired another shot at the bear, and it climbed off Steven, stumbled a few feet, and fell to the ground. Its body lay slumped next to Steven. Ty rushed over to his friend. He held Steven's head in his hands and urged him to wake up. But Steven lay still. He did not move. He did not utter a sound. He was dead. Blood poured from his gaping wounds, but he also had a single gunshot wound in his chest. Ty had shot his friend. In the heat of the moment, amongst all the commotion and chaos, he had accidentally hit Steven in the chest. No one knows whether the bullet hit the bear first and came ricocheting through its body and into the father of two, or whether Ty had shot Steven directly. Either way, Steven was dead, and it was a tragic end. As Steven lay motionless on the ground, Ty made the desperate and agonizing call to the authorities. He had lost his friend. What was supposed to be an incredible adventure, an enjoyable time spent in the great outdoors, had ended in tragedy, and it was his fault. Soon, he heard the sound of a chopper overhead. He directed the rescue team to his location, and Steven's body was lifted out of the woodland and handed over to the Lincoln County authorities in Montana. An autopsy was performed at the Montana State Crime Lab, and it was confirmed that although Steven had sustained injuries from the bear during the attack, particularly to his legs, he had actually died from the gunshot wound to his chest. Ty had unintentionally killed his friend while attempting to save his life. He was traumatized by the news that it was him who had killed Steve, not the bear. He was torn by the fact that if he had remained a bit more calm and focused, Steve might have survived. The bear was taken to a lab in Bozeman. It was weighed and determined to be a male and was estimated to have been between 6 and 8 years old. Sadly, bear attacks claim the lives of 5 or 6 individuals in the United States every year. But this time it wasn't the bear to blame for the loss of life. Ty received no charges from authorities from this incident, and it was considered to be an accident. From the amount of bullets it took to stop the bear, it's likely that even if Ty hadn't shot Steve, he would have still met his terrifying final affliction.